I'm like, no, I don't want to know you. I absolutely hate you. And now they've found sort of maybe one player to hyper fixate on.
Kudos to her. She has elevated an entire sport
That they feel stands at odds with what a WNBA player is in their mind.
Love a player. Love Caitlin. Love whoever you want to love.
That actually just feels like it's hate being disguised as love.
Sue Bird just put herself on full display. And honestly, at this point, it is hard to watch without cringing. Her latest podcast episode made one thing painfully obvious to anyone paying attention. She is shaping Team USA's future around Paige Bueckers while quietly pushing Caitlin Clark off to the side like she barely matters.
Caitlin, you're going to have to wake up and smell the coffee. Sue Bird does not rock with you the way you think she does.
The title says it straight up, and the visuals back it all the way. The full conversation only reinforces what people have been noticing for a while now. When you keep leaving the league's biggest attraction out of your coverage, that is not some harmless mistake or slip-up. That is a deliberate decision, plain and simple.
Let's start right here. Let's look at the title. Let's look at the title alone. Team USA 2028 forecast. Paige Bueckers and the young stars on the rise. Oh, so this is the Paige Bueckers show.
Now that decision is starting to blow back in real time, and the reaction has been loud. People are connecting the dots. The big question floating around right now is how long this approach can last. How long do you pretend the player who brought massive attention, money, and momentum to the league is suddenly not central to its future before everyone fully calls it out? That brings us straight to the Sue Bird podcast episode that pushed this situation from questionable into outright absurd. The episode dropped with a title that basically spelled out where the focus is. Team USA 2028, Paige Bueckers, and other young names on the rise took center stage.
Sue Bird absolutely plays Caitlin Clark again today. It is happening over and over and over to the point.
Caitlin Clark was nowhere in that forward-looking picture, even though her impact on USA basketball is impossible to miss. There was not even an attempt at balance, like framing it as a broader next-generation moment. The omission stood out, and people noticed it immediately. Paige Bueckers gets the bright lights and the full-star rollout, while everyone else is tossed into a vague young stars bucket like background noise. The contrast is obvious. The favoritism is not subtle at all, and it is hard to miss once you see it. And it somehow gets even messier when you actually watch the episode.
For a large group of people, mostly that exist online, it wasn't enough, like, love a player, love Caitlin, love whoever you want to love. But it was simultaneously, they had to then say that every player that ever came.
A graphic pops up comparing the younger group against the veterans, framed like a big statement moment about the future of the league. Front and center, there is Paige Bueckers again. Jackie Young is positioned to look like a major piece. Angel Reese gets her shine and her moment to stand out. Then there is the silence. One name is missing from this entire visual lineup, and it sticks out immediately. Caitlin Clark is nowhere to be found. This is the same player who flipped WNBA attendance numbers almost overnight. The same player who smashed viewership records again and again, pulling in people who never cared about women's basketball before.
Called sports fandom a complex experience. I loved that so much. Do say more about that. What feels misunderstood or oversimplified or uncovered?
Yeah, I think like there's so many aspects of this that we could focus on. Like one of them is sports hate. Sports hate is so unique, I think. And it's also, I feel like, healthy in a world that's full of a lot of hate that's very unhealthy and very bad. I think in general, hate, I try to shy away from, but you've got, we're humans, so you have to have all range of emotional experiences. And I think one of the safest places to put your hate is.
Yet somehow, when it came time to visually represent young talent changing the league, she did not make the graphic. That is not a technical slip or someone rushing through a slide. That is a choice. When patterns keep repeating like this, it starts to look less like coincidence and more like deliberate erasing happening right in front of everyone. Throughout the entire podcast episode, Sue Bird consistently centers the conversation around Paige Bueckers, framing her as the clear focal point of the future.
I'm trying to do some things. I'm going to have to get some looks at some different people and some different lineups. Yeah. So it's definitely how I'm viewing it.
She's definitely building Team USA around Paige Beckers.
The praise is constant and unchallenged, creating a tone where one player is elevated above everyone else without much discussion of context or comparison. Sue describes the younger group as a tight unit, often referring to them collectively while still placing Paige at the front of the pack. Paige is positioned as the emotional leader, the competitive driver, and the person everyone else supposedly follows. Stories about scrimmages, tiebreakers, and internal competition are shared in a way that paints Paige as the engine behind it all. The language is warm, glowing, and intentional. To be clear, this is not an argument against Paige Bueckers as a basketball player. She is skilled, disciplined, and clearly puts in the work. Her talent is real, and her potential has never been in question. That acknowledgement matters, because this conversation is not about tearing someone down to make a point. The issue is the gap between the narrative being promoted and the reality reflected by fan behavior.
But I also feel like in terms of, look, sports fans are men, women, non-binary, anybody can be a sports fan. I think a lot of sports media caters to a specific male audience, and I also feel like that's a male audience that has not been told that their feelings are something that they can experience. And so I think a lot of the time men don't even realize how much of an emotional experience being a sports fan is.
When you look at the league last season, Paige's team ranked near the bottom in home attendance. That is not a personal attack. That is a measurable data point that reflects market response. Attendance is one of the clearest indicators of connection between players and fans, and it tells a story that does not match the level of hype being pushed. Star power cannot be created through repeated endorsements or storytelling alone. Fans decide who they invest in based on what moves them emotionally and what keeps them coming back. You cannot will that connection into existence. It either happens or it does not, and no amount of framing can replace organic demand. What makes this moment uncomfortable is how confidently the narrative is delivered, as if the numbers do not exist or do not matter. There is no pause to question whether the messaging aligns with what audiences are actually responding to. Instead, the assumption seems to be that visibility and repetition will eventually create belief. Sue Bird comes across less like an observer and more like an advocate determined to shape perception. The tone suggests an effort to guide fans toward a conclusion rather than allowing them to arrive there naturally. That approach feels out of step with how modern sports audiences operate, especially in an era where information is widely available and easily compared. When the story being told keeps clashing with what fans see in real life, trust starts to erode. People notice when promotion does not line up with results. They notice when certain names are amplified while others are minimized without explanation. Over time, that disconnect becomes impossible to ignore, and it invites skepticism instead of loyalty. This moment on the podcast is not just about one player or one episode. It reflects a broader struggle between manufactured narratives and fan-driven reality, and that tension is becoming harder to smooth over with praise alone.
And so that's kind of part of my thing, is I just want them to feel like, hey, the way that sports make you feel, we can talk through that. So it's just such a weird experience that people who don't love sports don't understand, but that I want to kind of pick them.
The fans have already made their choice about who they want to see running the show on the court. When Caitlin Clark plays, arenas sell out. When her games hit television, the ratings jump immediately. Even when she is not on the floor, people still tune in just to follow her team because they are locked into her story and want to see what happens next. That kind of pull is organic. You cannot fake it, and you cannot manufacture it through branding meetings or podcast hype. That is what real impact looks like in real time. But the WNBA establishment seems committed to pushing a preferred storyline instead of acknowledging what is right in front of them. It feels like walking into a packed restaurant where almost everyone is ordering tacos, and the manager keeps insisting the cheeseburger is the real star of the menu. The numbers are not complicated. Fans speak with their money and their attention. Right now, they are making their preference clear, and it is not lining up with the narrative being promoted from the top. If you rewind just a bit, this podcast episode was not an isolated moment. It was part of a pattern. Days before this heavy Paige Bueckers focused episode dropped, Sue Bird allowed guests on her podcast to openly go after Caitlin Clark's fan base without offering any real pushback. During that conversation, Clark's supporters were painted as toxic and negative, framed as people watching women's basketball for reasons that supposedly clash with what the league claims to stand for. That framing was left unchallenged. Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe sat through it, nodding along as if those comments were fair and harmless. For a player who has brought in massive attention and new viewers, that kind of dismissal does not land quietly. Fans noticed it, and it added another layer to the growing frustration around how Caitlin Clark and the people supporting her are being treated. There was not a single pause to say, maybe we should not lump millions of supporters into one negative box. No pushback at all. Just quiet agreement with a take that should have been challenged immediately. That is what made the moment so frustrating to watch. Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe have spent years building their public images as champions for women's sports. They constantly talk about growing the game, pulling in new audiences, and pushing women's basketball into the mainstream. That has been their message for a long time. But the moment a massive wave of new fans actually shows up, spending money and giving real attention, those fans suddenly get treated like a problem. Instead of being welcomed, they are questioned. Their motives are picked apart. They are framed as being there for the wrong reasons. That logic does not add up. You cannot beg for growth and then criticize the people who respond to that call. The guest on that podcast went even further, suggesting that new viewers were somehow out of place because they were focused on one player who supposedly does not align with what a WNBA player is meant to represent.
Sharp starts to talk about the attendance and says, like, basically that Caitlin had the highest attendance in the playoffs, which Caitlin Clark played her first 2 rounds in Connecticut, which only holds roughly 10,000.
There's an aspect of them like defending their stances on her. Like, we were right about Caitlin and this is our defense. And I still think there's something twisted there because nobody ever said that Caitlin wasn't going to be.
That statement carries a lot of weight and it deserves to be broken down. What is a WNBA player supposed to be? Exactly. Because Caitlin Clark checks every box a professional league could ask for. She is undeniably skilled. She works relentlessly. She is marketable in ways that translate directly into revenue. Most importantly, she makes the game exciting to watch at the highest level. Yet that combination is treated like a flaw instead of an asset. Her popularity is framed as suspicious. Her success in bringing in viewers is seen as uncomfortable. It starts to feel like the real issue is not Caitlin Clark, but the idea that her fan base does not fit a narrow, gate-kept image of what an acceptable WNBA fan is supposed to look like or believe. At this point, the pattern is no longer subtle or debatable. This is not about basketball breakdowns, player development, or some long-term master plan for the sport. It is about narrative control and deciding who is allowed to represent the league on the biggest stage. Caitlin Clark did not wait for validation or permission. She forced her way into the conversation through performance, consistency, and an undeniable impact that shows up in arenas, ratings, and revenue. The uncomfortable truth is that her rise disrupted a carefully managed storyline. She did not come in fitting a pre-approved mold or following a script that others were comfortable with. She brought in fans who had not been paying attention before. She changed who was watching, how many people were watching, and why they were watching. That kind of disruption always makes gatekeepers nervous. The league can keep pretending that all of this is coincidence. It can keep framing omissions as harmless choices or simple editorial decisions. But fans are not stupid. They see the sold-out crowds. They see the spikes in television numbers. They see the social media engagement that dwarfs everything else. They see the jerseys, the ticket demand, and the cultural pull that cannot be replicated through promotion alone. What makes this situation even more revealing is the response from certain voices who claim to want growth while quietly rejecting the very audience growth looks like. You cannot say you want women's basketball to be mainstream and then scoff when mainstream attention arrives. You cannot ask for bigger platforms and then criticize the people who help build them. This is where the disconnect becomes impossible to defend. The fans are responding to what excites them. They are choosing with their time and money. That choice does not erase anyone else's talent or contributions. It simply reflects reality. Trying to override that reality with curated messaging only deepens the frustration and widens the gap between the league and its audience. Caitlin Clark is not the problem here. She is the case study. She represents what happens when talent, opportunity, and timing collide in a way that captures the public's attention. Instead of embracing that moment, Parts of the establishment seem more focused on resisting it, reframing it, or minimizing it. And that resistance is exactly why more people are paying closer attention. The louder the silence becomes, the more questions get asked. The more questions get asked, the harder it becomes to keep everything neatly packaged. If you want the conversations that are not being softened or filtered, if you want context that does not disappear from graphics or get brushed aside on podcasts, that is where Courtside Leaks comes in. This is where the uncomfortable topics live. This is where patterns get called out and receipts get examined. Follow Courtside Leaks, stay tuned, and keep watching closely. The future of women's basketball is being shaped in real time, whether certain people like it or not. We've got every angle covered, every leak, every backstage twist, every moment they won't show you. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, and share this video. Stay locked in with Courtside Leaks, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.